What is happening, everyone? Welcome on into the Check Your Brain podcast. I, of course, am Tony Mazur. Thank you for listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the other podcatchers out there. And thank you for watching this on Rumble, YouTube, and Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Tony Mazur, TonyMazur. If you enjoyed this episode, I have plenty more where that came from. Several thousand at this point, I believe, although a couple of them are doubles because one is a audio only, one is a video on my Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur, where I curse, I get into other things that I don't normally do so on the free podcast. But on the free episodes, I like to talk about different subjects. Could be politics, could be pop culture, could be sports, which is what I'm doing here with my guest, a returning guest. Sometimes I have a returning guest who hasn't been on in a year or two or even 3 years. This guest hasn't been on in about 6.5 days, and that is my guest, Marty Gitlin. Last week we talked about breakfast cereals. We talked about the best sitcoms of all time and the Jumping the Shark and laugh tracks and everything. So if you haven't checked that out, go back, stop this podcast, listen to that one first, and then go check this one out. And then we also talked about cartoon characters as well. Today we're going to talk sports because before Marty became a prolific author, he was a prolific sports writer. He worked for the News Herald just up the street from me here in Northeast Ohio, and he worked for CBS Sports and a bunch of other places. But first, before we get into your bio once again, Marty, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. This is great. Appreciate
So,
it.
so you were telling me about what we talked on the phone recently about your obsession with wanting to just do something you wanted to do. You'd done what your bosses told you you needed to do for so long, and you said, you know what? Why not I do this? So, after all the years of sports writing, you decided, you know what? I'm gonna start writing. Like, was there a specific moment in sports writing, or what was it that caused you to just drop all that and decide I'm just gonna be an author now?
Well, it's a long story actually. After my which I'm not going to go into too much detail, but after my sports writing career was over, um, I it's insane, but I tried to become a nursing home administrator.
Really? Wow.
It's a long story. It involves a woman that I was engaged to who broke up with me 3 days before our wedding. And she was in that career, and I was trying to do that. And it was like, it turns out I was like completely not suited for anything like that at all. And I was really scrambling for a while. It was very difficult. I had a very difficult period in my life in the early 2000s. And then around 2005, I got out of that business and I started getting assignments from this website, writing sports stuff, online. And then in 2006, that the company that had hired me to do that, they said, "Why don't you start writing books for us, educational books on history, sports?" They liked my writing, and I started. It turned my career completely around. Book writing did, and I started writing a lot of books on those subjects. And then in 2012, I decided I was going to do my own thing, and I started writing books that were my own ideas, that were not assignments. And I got a book agent and everything you needed to do, and kind of the rest is history. But I started doing sports books um, around 2013, 2014. I started writing sports books, and it's been a great ride. I enjoy it very much.
But before you got it, because I want to talk about the sudden Sam McDowell book
Yes.
as well, and all the others that you did on the teams and some players as well. But being a sports writer, because you kind of came of age during a time where you had obviously newspapers, you had your deadline you had to reach and everything, and you went to the Richfield Coliseum, eventually Gund Arena, the old stadium here in Cleveland, and then eventually the new stadiums, plural. Now we're going to have another stadium in a couple of years here in Northeast Ohio. So you have all of that, and then eventually there was that transition where you were starting to hear people say, "Well, you know what? You're gonna have to start doing a blog for the website." And I remember talking to old time sports writers who were having a little bit of a problem with that. That it was like you knew what column they had to do, you know what time it had to be in. If it was one of those West Coast games or a game that was in extra innings or overtime, that you're like, I'm not going to make the deadline, that they're going to have to put a blurb in there saying, it didn't make the deadline. You're going to have to check it out tomorrow to see the full story, all of that. But then you eventually got into the digital age. You were there. What was that transition like for you and some of the guys who were older than you who were still hanging on sports writing, that they were told to do a little bit more than just write the one conventional column a day?
Well, I never, as at the News Herald, I never, it never happened to me because I left in 2002. So that was before all that stuff was going on. And that's one of the reasons I even left, was because the internet had just started coming in, and everything was getting done online. And there was no movement, there were no raises, no one was getting new subscriptions to the newspapers. And
So they were expecting you to do more work for the same amount of
yeah,
pay.
there was talk about me like taking pictures at high school football games while I covered the games, and it was like, no, I'm out. And I left. And that was when I was, dating that woman that I became engaged to, that whole crazy era. But anyway, but I did experience that in 2009 because I got hired by CBS. CBS Sports hired me to cover the Browns in 2009. From 2009 to 2012, I covered the Browns, and then they ended that experiment with individuals covering NFL teams. But I had to, text out all, every second, so and so just made a nice tackle in practice today. He's looking like he might be the starting linebacker, and whatever when the season starts. And then so I had to adapt to that pretty quickly. And then when I covered games, I covered Browns games home, and I did some road games as well. I was, texting like everything, like every second, 18-yard pass from, whoever there was so many different quarterbacks. I can't really think about, Brady
There still
Quinn.
are a lot of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I know. Brady Quinn. I know there still is, from Brady Quinn to whoever, Muhammad Massaquoi or something,
Chauncey
and
Stuckey.
oh my God, they had the worst receivers back then. Oh Lord.
They're not too
Uh,
good right now either.
no, no, they don't have, no, their tight ends are better than their receivers. But anyway, so that it became a problem. Not a problem, but it became something I had to do. And then in 2012, CBS ended that experiment with individuals covering NFL teams, so they put me on fantasy sports. And from 2013 to 2015, I gave fantasy baseball, football advice on their website. And then they wanted me to move to Jacksonville, Florida, where their headquarters was. And I said, I can't do that. I got kids in school here. I got a family my wife has a job. I can't just move to Jacksonville. And so we parted ways in 2015. But anyway, so I never really had to adapt very much to the new technology and social media as much as a lot of other people have.
I've been in plenty of locker rooms, all four sports, along with the college sports. And it just seems as time has gone on, you have the old time sports writers where they work for the major newspaper. It's the main beat person who asks the questions, but it's usually the AP. And now we have the in in team, I don't know what you would call it, but the team reporter who writes for the
Yeah.
website, who is obviously biased, and yet they're usually going to get the first question. So it just seems that as far as the sports media integrity, I think that's completely out the window. You're not perhaps in New York it's a little different, but when you're in the Buffaloes, the Clevelands, the St. Louis, you're at the mercy of whatever the team wants to push.
Right,
And
right. You
as
see
far as
that,
that
and
coverage goes,
the sideline reporters, that do those, and now every game, after every game, they'll pull two or three guys out from that game, whoever did whatever, the pitcher or the guy that hit a home run, and then they'll be in the room and you interview them. I don't really know because I haven't been in the locker room since 2012 when I was the Browns locker room. But I don't know how many of the interviews are being done in the locker rooms now. But I guess I do see on TV, the interviews being done after a ball game, and they'll be interviewing the pitcher in front of his locker. So I guess there's still some of that too.
Yeah, they still do some of that, but if it's the manager or the starting pitcher who threw a complete game shutout or whatever, they'll bring it into the press conference area. I had that a couple of times where, let's see, I was there for Irvin Santana's no hitter he threw against the team known as the Indians at the time. He was playing for the Angels, and they put it in because obviously it's a no hitter. It wasn't shown locally on Sports Time Ohio though, but. It was so they brought in Mike Scioscia, Irvin Santana, and his catcher Bobby Wilson. And then there was another time about a year earlier that Steven Strasburg had his first road game. It was second major league start, and they brought Jim Riggleman, who was the manager at the time, along with Pudge Rodriguez, which I thought was kind of cool. I'm like, oh wow, he's still hanging on there. And so they used to do that just for special occasions. Now it's all the time. But then COVID hit, and when they were doing these, that
Right.
they didn't want people, they didn't want random strangers that are going to be in a locker room. So they started doing a lot of these over Zoom, the way you and I are talking. And I figured that that was going to be what the future was going to be. Is what's the point of going even covering games if the only access you're going to get is through the camera? Because that's what happened. Is that even when things started opening up and the vaccines out there, that all of the beat writers and the beat reporters are still in their seat at the stadium, but they're doing it on Zoom with people that are 5 floors beneath them. And I'm like, then what's the point of even covering games anymore then?
Yeah, no, I suppose that people, beat writers, can just watch the game on TV and do a Zoom for the interviews and write from home. And I suppose, I mean, they don't do that. They go to the games, but I suppose they could just cover games from home.
So you had a book recently, or a couple of years ago, about sudden Sam McDowell, and he was my dad's favorite pitcher. He had always talked
Yeah,
about Louis Tiant, Sonny Siebert growing up, but he loved Sam McDowell, and we always have those favorite players who were not necessarily Hall of Famers. So next to me, right here, I have one of these. This is an Albert Bell from 1996 that I always keep next to me on the podcast, and right after his 50-50 season, and then
yeah.
followed up with a very good season, his final one in Cleveland. But
Should have
my
won
favorite
MVP
player,
in '95,
oh yeah, and my
no
favorite player
doubt.
growing up and of all time is Kenny Lofton. And although I think the Hall of Fame unfortunately is watered down now, there is an opportunity for someone like Kenny Lofton to go to the Hall of Fame. Sam McDowell, just like Herb Score before him, were two left-handed pitchers, fireballers, who were, if anybody saw them at the time, you would say, "Oh, that's first ballot Hall of Famer right there." Uh, Herb Score got hit in the face and never really truly recovered. Eventually, became a broadcaster for the team for 30 years. Um, but uh, but Sam McDowell, his wasn't a comebacker to the face. His was a couple of drinks down the old throat, and became an alcoholic, and it really derailed his career. So, talk about the process of writing a book about someone who was so revered here in our neck of the woods of Northeast Ohio. Yet, I think if you talk to an average baseball fan, it's just a footnote in baseball history.
Yeah. Well, to say that McDowell could have been another Sandy Koufax is not at all an exaggeration. He might have been the greatest high school pitcher who ever lived. I mean, his numbers in high school were insane. Every team wanted him. He signed a $75,000 bonus with Cleveland. He was on To Tell the Truth. There's a video of him on To Tell the Truth as an 18-year-old kid who had just signed with Cleveland. My name is Sam McDowell. My name is Sam. Who the real Sam McDowell's? Please stand up. And so anyway, and I knew a little bit about all that, and I was a Cleveland Indians fan as a kid, and I love McDowell, and I thought, in like I don't know 5 years ago or whatever, I was like, someone should write a book about Sam McDowell because I knew about the alcoholism. I knew that he had recovered to the point where he was a in the bat, baseball assistance team, and he had become almost really the first sports psychologist of all time. Anyway, so I called Bobby DiBiasio with the Indians, and he set me up with Sam McDowell's phone number. And I called him up, and McDowell was like, I've had a couple other people that have asked me to do autobiographies, but they wanted to be a sensationalized.
Yeah.
autobiographies about, whatever, about his life and about his alcoholism or about his career. And he said, I don't want to sensationalize. I want a real autobiography. So he had me write a chapter, and he liked it, and we moved forward. And so I wrote, I would write a chapter, then I would call him and email him, and we would connect with what was going to be in the next chapter, and we just kept doing it all the way through. And it turned out to be just definitely the most fascinating project I've ever worked on, because first of all, I loved Sam McDowell, and his life was just so tumultuous, and his career and between 75 and 80, when alcoholism just almost killed him. He almost committed suicide. He tried to commit suicide during his career in 1963, which is at the beginning of the book. And there were just so many fascinating aspects of his life, and the way, he hasn't had a drink in 40 years. And then he saved Bernie Carbo's life. Bernie Carbo was ready to commit suicide, and he talked him down. All these, his life was absolutely fascinating. So the book was fascinating to me to do. And I think it's a fascinating read also. It's called The Saga of Sudden Sam. And the rise, fall, and redemption of Sam McDowell. So it was great. The whole thing was great. And it reached, I think, number 11 on Amazon in baseball books at one point, which was nice, So it sold really, really well too. And I went and did so many events with Sam McDowell to sell the books in Cleveland and Pittsburgh, because he's from Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
So
I completely forgot that he played for other teams, but he was with the Yankees and the Giants and the Pirates after his
yeah.
career. But they were just so unmemorable because of what he was going through at the time.
Oh, he was by 71, by 72, 71 was his last year with Cleveland. Then he got traded for Gaylord Perry,
Yeah.
which was a complete, and Frank Duffy, who was a serviceable shortstop, for McDowell. And so it was a complete steal for Cleveland.
One of the few times
But
that's ever
because
happened.
what's that?
One of the few times that's ever happened.
Yeah,
Usually it's
well,
the
back
opposite way.
then they were busy trading Chris Chambliss and Greg Nettles to the Yankees for a pile of people that didn't work out. Let's put it that way. But anyway, so the McDowell thing was just wonderful from beginning to end. I just loved it, and we became friends, and we still talk.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when I think about the 1995 team, which was the first team that I really fell in love with, and it's the 30th anniversary this year. They did a couple of commemorations over the summer, but that team didn't win. They didn't win the World Series. Now, I think a lot of people expected, oh, we'll be back there next year, and they weren't. They eventually came in '97, but it was almost a different team. It was a different mood.
They only won, I think, 86 games in 1997.
Yeah, and they made it to Game 7 of the World Series with the team that the only starters from the previous time was, I think, Sandy Alomar, Manny Ramirez, and Omar Vizquel, because they were at their positions because Tony
Right,
moved
Lofton
across
came
the
back.
diamond.
Yeah, Lofton came back. They Lofton left, and they got David Justice, and Marquise Grissom. They got, but yeah, no, it was interesting. No, and the starting pitching wasn't nearly as good. And by the late '90s, when your ace was, they still had Nagy and Dave Burba and these guys, and it
Bartolo
just
Colon, young
Bartolo,
Bartolo.
right? Cologne, yeah. Well, Cologne was I guess, their ace, but and he was fine. But it was the steroid era. In the steroid era, if you had like a 4.5 ERA, you were doing fine.
Well, that's what made Pedro
It was a
Martinez.
bastardization of baseball. I hated that era.
Well, actually, I want to mention that because Pedro Martinez, his 99 and 2000 seasons are some of the greatest in the history because considering the fact that if you had a 4 ERA, you were fine. You were making all-star teams in those days, and yet he's throwing under 2, which is
Yeah,
incredible. And every
he had
time out, he's
one
throwing
year.
10
I don't remember
strikeouts.
which year it was. I don't remember which year it was. Pedro Martinez had an ERA 1 point lower than any starting pitcher in baseball,
Yep. I think
which
it was
is,
2000. It was one of those
yeah,
years, but it was
insane. It's insane.
unbelievable.
It's crazy to think about that.
Where his back was so bad that he couldn't pitch, and yet he comes in and throws like 5 or 6 no-hit innings against the Indians in the '99 ALDS,
Yeah,
the team that
yeah,
scored over 1,000 runs, the most in the
yeah.
modern era, and
That was
couldn't get past him.
that was the greatest pitching performance I ever saw in person. He pitched, I think, six. I think he went. It was a high scoring game. The Indians were winning, I think 7-6 or something in the fourth inning.
Troy O'Leary hit 2 home runs, including a grand
Yeah,
slam.
and even though they were winning that game, game five, when Pedro Martinez came into that game and knowing there were 6 innings left and they were only up by 1 run, I was like, Red Sox are going to win this game, and they did.
Yeah, just completely shut him out. They had a random guys like Will Cordero and Harold Baines on the team. And that was when they were just trying to recreate some kind of mid-90s magic that they didn't have. But that you see this happens with a lot of teams. They keep it going long after that their shelf life was. So we're talking about the steroid era, and one thing about those years that I find interesting when I look back, and you're seeing this as the old time sports writers are retiring or passing away, and the new crop of millennial Gen Z writers are coming on board, and they're looking at the Bonses and the Clemenses and the McGuires and the Sosas and the Cansecos with a little bit more, I don't want to say reverence, but they're not as quick to writing them off as maybe a baby boomer who cares a little more about the integrity of baseball. And so you're noticing that Bonds is starting to climb back up and Clemens starting to climb back up. I don't know if they'll ever make the Hall of Fame at some point, whether it's on the veterans ballot. But one thing I found interesting about that time, as opposed to what we're seeing right now, where you're getting guys like Cal Raleigh hitting over 60 home runs and
Yeah,
Schwarber, but then their batting average is 240. And yet during the steroid era, you can say whatever you want about Sosa and Griffey and all of them. They were still hitting 310, 315, 320. And yet the approach to baseball has changed so much that just a couple of years ago, 2017, and then eventually eclipsed again in 2019, more home runs were hit ever, ever in the
yeah.
history of the game. Way more than the steroid era. So then you go, wait a second here. Is it because these guys are uh, dieting properly? Are they taking the proper proteins and the pre workouts and the aminos and the macros and the micros? Or is it that Major League Baseball decided to buy Rawlings and tamper with the baseballs to make sure that they fly a little
I
further?
think they did. I think that the ball was a little bit juiced in that era, and well, first of all, the pitching right now is so much better than it was back then and in my era when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, because they're throwing the average fastball now from a starting pitcher has got to be about 95, 90, and the late movement on pitches, the split finger fastballs and the sliders and the sweepers that they're calling now, and it's insane what these pitchers are able to do now in terms of that's the most important thing for a pitcher now is late movement, because then you can't square it up. And I mean, these guys are throwing 97, 98, it's just it's so much harder to hit. And I mean, I understand. I think I read earlier this year where the average batting average in baseball now, the total batting average of all major league players, and I think it might have gone up after the All-Star break, but it was like 237 or 238. The Guardians team batting average was what, 227?
No.
228 team batting average. And I don't know. But hitters are also swinging for the fences more. And I think there are not that many Stephen Kwans or Luis Arises out there. Hitters are wanna hit home runs just in general, and that's the way it's been really since the steroid era.
Luis
And
Arias
so,
has 3 batting titles. I believe had him with 3 different teams
yes,
too.
he did.
Minnesota,
Miami.
Miami, and San Diego. But I read somewhere going through the analytics that he's not as valuable. That back in the day,
Right.
you would have your guy that would hit 357, and they're on a division-winning team, and this guy's the key guy that you're putting is the number 2 guy in the order. He's the
Rod
contact hitter,
Carew.
and yet it's now to the point where someone like Arias can hit 340. He's not this year, but he can hit 340, and yet they would say no, but the guy who's hitting 240 is way more valuable. And just that doesn't sit well with me. Maybe call me an old traditional guy, call me a fuddy duddy. But as far as baseball goes, I just I look at this and I that's why I appreciate someone like a Stephen Kwan who puts the ball in play, who doesn't try to always swing for the fence. Can he hit home runs? Sure. Does he always? No. He hits gap shots. He's hitting
Right.
doubles. He's
Right.
incredible when it comes to
You
hitting
know,
situational.
it's the adage about, how well a strikeout's just like any other out is not true.
I hate it.
And even players have been saying, well, it doesn't matter if I strike out or pop out or whatever, but if you can't put the ball in play when you strike out, and Quan is one of the great examples of that. Quan makes contact. I think Quan should be batting. He goes in these slumps where he's flying out a lot. He's not hitting line drives, and but a guy like Quan is very valuable because he puts the ball in play. Look what the Guardians are doing right now. The
Yeah.
Guardians, it's funny. You should mention that because I heard a stat where the Guardians and the Tigers are both averaging 4 runs per game during this unbelievable stretch in September. Yet the Guardians are winning and the Tigers are losing because the Guardians are moving base runners. They're putting the ball in play or whatever. And well, obviously, and their pitching has been a zillion times better than what the Tigers are doing. But that's what the Guardians have to do. They have to play that way.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's
I,
it's really kind of an interesting thing, all this analytics and stuff like that. But I don't know if analytics explains everything.
no, I think a lot of it is because I mean, we all played Little League baseball, and I remembered, you can be 10, you can be in high school. And I just remember that time where you're up there and you strike out on a curveball, or it's a fastball and you're called out looking, it's right on the paint. You're like, ah, you want to throw your helmet, throw your bat because you're mad. You're pissed off that you just struck out. Yet if I had hit a dinker to shortstop, I wouldn't be as mad because I at least made contact. I tried to run it out. I almost did. It could have been an infield hit. So I'm not as mad. Yet it's the opposite now, where the attempt now of when you're striking out and you're just wailing through a pitch, and you say, well, the intent was I was trying to hit a home run, as opposed to a dinker to shortstop. Now that's not as valuable as the strikeout. And I'm saying, what is this bizarro world? What's going on here?
Yeah.
I just it takes away that love for the game because I like the pitchers duels. Yeah, sure. And there are still pitchers duels because guys are throwing 102 miles an hour and throwing 92-mile-an-hour sinkers and whatever pitches they're going to throw out there. Not Gaylord Perry spitballers, but
Yeah.
you're seeing a lot of that still go on. But I don't know. I kind of like the triple in the gap as opposed to the 3-run Earl Weaver home run. And are the baseball fans receptive to that? Because it seemed like a lot of that came
No.
around the time that Rob Manfred took over in
Right.
2015. That it
Well, what
seemed
do they
like
say
that
about
he was looking at younger generations who were scrolling through Instagram at the games and thought, "Hey, what can bring more younger people to the audience, to the crowd? How about hitting 12 home runs a game, making every game a home run derby?" And I don't know, as a baseball guy, longtime baseball guy, I just it kind of doesn't sit well with me. But
I think
maybe I'm old fashioned. Maybe I need to get with the times.
Major League Baseball is finally getting it, I think, a little bit because like 5 years, 4 or 5 years ago, when it came out that there were more strikeouts than singles, I think was what they or
Oof.
hits even. Yeah, more strikeouts than hits that year, and it was like all or nothing. I think they said what 40% of all at bats were either home runs or strikeouts. And I think baseball finally understands that what young people want, and that's what they have to do. They have to bring young people back in the game. They have to get young people interested in it. And they're doing a really good job, I think, marketing it with the commercials they have, these kind of interesting commercials they've had marketing Major League Baseball, but also getting action into the game. Younger fans want action. That's why football's popular, basketball, baseball. There was too much downtime, so they have the pitch clock now, and they eliminated the shift. And I don't like that they eliminated the shift because
Yeah,
I
do
think you
I?
should be able to play anyone wherever you want. But I understand why they're doing it, and anything. And I'm a big baseball is my favorite sport, and I want young people to like it. And so I understand why they're doing some of the things to bring young people back into the game. And I think it's working. Attendance has been up. I think there's a little bit more interest in the individual superstars. They used to say like 10 years ago that, Mike Trout could walk down the street of a big city and no one would recognize him. And it was true. Could you imagine in the 1950s, Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays walking down the street and they'd be besieged? And it's not like that anymore. And I think they're trying to bring a little bit back of that back. And I think I think Major League Baseball would like to have more, a little bit more of a mix between the home runs and guys that could, hit doubles in the gap and triples in the gap and run and steal bases. They made the bases bigger now and make it a little bit more of a faster paced action game. And I think that's what they're trying to do. And I think, it's starting to take hold.
Well, I think also I've said this for years about baseball is that it's a great sport to see live because you don't have to watch the game at all. You don't have to pay attention. You can just go there. And I think teams are starting to realize that. For example, the Colorado Rockies have had a historically bad year, yet their attendance is pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, is it because Denver is a commuter town or is a transplant town where there's a lot of out of towners, a lot of LA people move there because of, I don't know, weed laws or whatever it is, better jobs, better opportunities, and they can go see the Dodgers or the Angels that end up playing there? Possibly. Could it be that there's a large Blue Moon brewery that's there at Coors Field? Probably. Could you smoke a hookah and vape there? Yeah, probably. There's all these other things that you can do at a game. You can sit there and watch the game, but not watch the game. You can have a conversation, a deep conversation about philosophy, about politics, about family issues, about nothing at all. That's something that you can't really do in basketball and football because of, like you said, of how fast paced it is. And I think maybe that is something that Major League Baseball is either aware of now or they should be aware of is that you can have that opportunity. I took my godson to a baseball game about a month ago, an Indians game or Guardians game now, and we're sitting there. Those kids that you can tell that dad's trying to get them into sports, but he's more of a math nerd or something that I could tell he's not going to be a big baseball fan. So what I was doing was I was talking to him about all the other things, the skyline of downtown Cleveland and the scoreboard and why baseball, why the stadium is set up here, what was here before the stadium was erected, and all this other
Yeah.
stuff. And I think all of that is what makes baseball, not just Major League Baseball, because it could be minor league baseball. It makes it great. My dad always talks about this story when many years ago we went up to Batavia, New York. We went to see a Batavia Muck Dogs game. And we were having a conversation about the fact that I didn't apply myself well enough in high school. And had I done so, who knows what could have happened? I could have gotten into better colleges. Or had I uh, use better weight training that I would have made a better baseball player, would have gone on to college had I not blown my arm out at Jacobs Field in an All-Star game. Who knows what could have happened? And he references that every so often by saying that, yeah, when we were up at that Batavia Muck Dogs game. Well, yeah, because we're at a game where there's 100 people. It's a Sunday afternoon. It's a lot of kids here. And you're seeing guys you don't know who they are. Who knows? Probably a couple of them made it to the majors. Most likely it's short season A, New York Penn League at the time. Probably none of them did. But it that's what the beauty of baseball is it lends itself to being all things to all people if you allow it. It doesn't just have to be no. We only want you focusing on the game because then everyone's gonna be like, well, I'm gonna see what's on Twitter right now.
Yeah. I'll tell you a little. My favorite story. This was 1972, and the Guardians, the Indians, were 6 games out. They had a little stretch where they were winning. They were still under 500, but they were doing it. They were like it was a division where they could still contend a little bit. They were 6 games out in early September, and we saw the Guardians the Indians, keep saying Guardians now, Indians on TV beat the Tigers in Detroit on a Friday night. And my dad said, come on, we're going to Detroit. I said, what? Yeah, we're going to Detroit. He just drove, middle of the night. we drove 3 hours to Detroit, and we saw and it was such an unbelievable bonding thing between my father and me, and we went and saw the guard Ray Fosse hit 2 home runs in the game, and we saw them, win 2 out of 3 in Detroit, split a doubleheader, and they went on Saturday and split a doubleheader on Sunday. And we were in the same hotel as the Indians. And my dad woke us up at like 2 in the morning on that Saturday night and said, "Come on, let's go get some. I'm hungry. Let's go get some pizza." And we went and got pizza, and I'll never forget my father for that. It was such a spontaneous thing, and it was all based on our love for baseball and our love for the Indians, and it was, hey, I mean, we're talking 53 years later, right? And I still remember it so distinctly, and I still remember it as my favorite dad moment ever.
Yeah, that's great.
And so there's something special about baseball that, yeah, I don't think if it was we went to a Cavaliers game or a Browns game, it would have been the same because, especially today with all the loudness at these games. The Cavaliers games is like deafening, and every second there has to be some kind of and I like some of that. I don't think it should be back in 1970 where there's no music or anything at all, but I think there could be a little bit of a tone down of that. You got to scream to talk to whoever you're with.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Ray Fosse because that's what made it great is that the players of my parents' generation became the broadcasters and the coaches of my
Yeah.
generation. And my mom, she had moved from Chicago and she moved to Chagrin Falls. And in the 70s, there was a mall at the time in our neck of the woods called Randall Park Mall. It was the
Sure.
biggest mall in America. It was a DeBartolo mall for about
Bedford. That was in
largest
Bedford.
for like 5 minutes, I think. And then another mall that was bigger opened up. And she met Ray Fosse and got a
Oh,
picture with him. She has a picture with Ray Fosse. And the A's were in town. And I was working for Major League Baseball at the time. And I'm like, Mom, I got to get a picture of your picture of Ray Fosse. And because I know he walks around over in the concourse or not the outside the press box. And so as he was leaving the press box and he had that big although it was all white at this point, but that big head of hair that he had. And I showed him, I said, Ray, I wanted to meet you. I'm Tony Mazur. And just not that you care or anything. And I showed him the picture with my mom and him from 1970. I think it was when he came back to the team in 1976. And it was a really cool moment. And my mom loved Rick Monday when he was with the Cubs, and I saw Rick Monday and Charlie Steiner with the Dodgers when they were in town, and it just baseball lends that self to that nostalgia that I hope today's generation of fathers who were raised on the Sandlot and Major League and these baseball movies of the late 80s, early 90s that they can pass that on to their kids.
and baseball lends itself to. I love that baseball. Um, NFL has obviously taken over as the most popular sport in America, and even the NBA, I guess, and Major League Baseball are like tied or whatever for popularity. I don't know what it is, but the NFL obviously. But in terms of nostalgia, in terms of records, in terms of debates, who was the better player, the 755 home runs by Hank Aaron that I still think of as the all-time record, even though Bonds broke it. But all those kind of things are way more indicative for baseball than any other sport. And I mean, who was the greatest baseball? Who was the greatest debate in the history of sports as to who was the better player was probably still, even to this day, Ted Williams or Joe DiMaggio,
Yep.
or maybe uh, Mickey Mantle or Willie Mays, and no one, or the 755 home runs. Nobody remembers the exact number of yards that Walter, or is it Emmett Smith now? You don't even know. I don't even know. Has to have the all-time record for most rushing yards or most passing yards. Nobody knows it because baseball is still the king when it comes to statistics. Because everything's individual. Baseball, everything is individual. With football and basketball, there's so many statistics that are based on that are influenced by other things. I mean, rushing yards by Emmitt Smith or whatever. Well, how many rushing yards would he have gotten if he had a lousy offensive line? But baseball is so individual, and I love that about that sport.
And it's also, I think, the one sport where your favorite player doesn't have to be the best player on the team. That I think in football, you're usually your favorite player is the quarterback, the receiver,
Yeah,
the defensive end who has the sacks and everything. But you're not picking like in football, your favorite player is not the left tackle usually, and unless you're the Browns and you've been
right. It's
historically
Joe
bad.
Thomas or the kicker. For the years I covered the Browns,
Phil Dawson, yeah.
Dawson was like he won. He was like the most valuable player, and he was their kicker.
But so like I go back to what you said about Sam McDowell that yeah he was a superstar. He should have been a much better superstar, but he ends up being one of those hall of pretty good players from back in the day. And then we can debate like, oh well, if he didn't have the substance problem, that he would have been this. And that's what makes that baseball so great. And I just remember about the '95 team that you talk to anyone around my age and even older who your favorite player on that team is, and you're going to get nine different answers. And
Yeah,
that's what's great about it. And some people say, like I said, Kenny Lofton. Others would say Albert Bell. Others would say Vizquel. Others would say Tomey. Others would say Jose Mesa up until '97. Others would say
Hershiser.
Carlos Baerga.
I
Others would
like
say Sandy
Hershiser
Alomar.
because he was such a good interview. Yeah.
Like even in my family, my mom loved Omar. I loved Kenny Lofton. My brother loved Manny Ramirez, and my dad didn't have a say because he was a cop, and I think he was, I think he had to deal with a couple of them on the force, so I think he was a little biased there. But uh, uh, I remember 1996. It was July of '96, and my grandmother was working for Chagrin Valley Country Club, and they would always do the Bell Baerga Golf Tournament. And I wanted to meet
Oh,
Albert Bell. I knew even at my age that I wasn't going to meet Albert Bell, but I would have loved that if he came over, signed an autograph, took a picture with us. We met Charles Oakley. They had other famous ball players around that time, and we're sitting there. It's my grandmother who's passed away, my brother and me, and Carlos Baerga is wearing a Gold's Gym tank top because that's what you wear on a golf course, and we were like, Carlos, Carlos. And he comes over and he's like, oh, how's it going? And they're like, oh, and I think we got an autograph. We're like, Carlos, can we get a quick picture? It's like, oh, yes, yeah, absolutely. And as we get the picture, somebody's like, hey, Carlos, we need you over here really quick. He's like, oh, thank you so much. That's great. So we get in the car. We're about to head to a medic drugstore for a 1 hour photo. We turn on 3WE, and it's Mike Snyder who says, breaking news, Carlos Baerga has been traded to the Mets. We're like, we
oh,
just saw him
wow.
15 minutes ago. And
Wow.
I talked to Bob DiBiasio and he confirmed that story because he was on the golf course. He had a cell phone, one of those brick cell phones at the time. And they were about to tee off. And Dan O'Dowd calls him and says, hey, are you near Carlos? And he's like, actually, yeah, he's right over by the tee. He's over there. And he was talking to us at the time. They said, well, we have a little situation right now. We're trading him to the Mets for Jeff Kent and Jose Vizcaino, which could have been a good trade, but it didn't really work out too well. But again, you're talking about a guy like Carlos Baerga, three-time All-Star, good switch hitter for his time, largely unmemorable second half of his career. Yet he'll come back to town and never have to buy a
Yeah.
meal, never have to buy a drink. And that's just what baseball does. And it has that impact on a lot of people in a lot of different generations that a guy who was a pretty solid player, but not a superstar, can still be this beloved in this town.
It's funny because baseball, they don't wear, they wear caps most of the time, and unless they're batting and they have the helmets and they're, just kind of, and in football, they're wearing all this gear and helmets and everything. And you don't really kind of get the flavor of their personality and everything's individual, and they're catching a ball in the outfield individually, and they're pitching the ball individually and catching whatever. And with football, it's like this big mass of people, the on the offensive line, the defensive line, these linebackers coming in, and it's like you can't get a real feel for the individual personalities, so you can say, oh, I really like this guy, for whatever reason. I really like that guy. Baseball's like perfect for that. And So I understand completely what you're saying. It's interesting about Baerga. I remember, I don't know why I remember this batting average. I think I have it right. He was batting 255 when he got traded, or he's batting 255. I guess he batted in 1996 that year. And there was rumors that he was messing around in the flats or whatever and having a good, he wasn't being as dedicated to his craft as he was supposed to. But anyway, yeah, it was
He was traded at the right time. It was one of the few
There's a
times
great
where they
story
actually
about it.
traded a guy at the right time. Now, they also traded that same year Jeremy Burnitz, who became a superstar for what was it? The rotting carcass of Kevin Seitzer, who was just a
Yeah.
Nick Swisher pom-pom
They
waiver at
they
that
had
time.
they had too many, the Richie Sexton. They had too many hitters.
Yeah.
Back in the late 90s, they had like
Ryan
Brian
Giles.
Giles. They couldn't, these guys couldn't fit in because that lineup was just insane. But they could have made better trades for them. They got Ricardo Rincon
Ugh.
for Giles, and he was like okay, but they needed a left-handed reliever, and that didn't work out. And they could have traded Jarrett Wright, from what I've heard. They could have traded Jarrett Wright and maybe another player or whatever, Pedro Martinez,
Or Kurt
and that would have
Schilling.
been like they would have won a World Series with him. And they didn't do
Instead, we got
that.
Doc
They
Gooden.
made some mistakes. What's that?
Instead, they got Dwight Gooden at that point.
Oh my God! And talk about it. He was a mess, emotionally. I mean, he had some problems anyway. Yeah. Yeah, I
Now,
remember he pitched was it a World Series game or a playoff game, and he gave up like 6 runs in 3 innings or something. I don't
yeah,
remember.
he also had one where he threw, I think, like 4 pitches and he got kicked out of the game already. Because him and Hargrove got thrown out for arguing balls and strikes against Boston in
Oh, is that
'98 in
right?
game two. Yeah, oh, yeah.
I
And
remember. Yeah, I was like at the very end of my. I covered that game that Gooden pitched in that. And
Joe
well,
Brinkman.
obviously it wasn't the World Series. It was playoffs because it was later. Must have been like 2000 or 99 or whenever Gooden came to the Cleveland.
Yeah, it was not. It was that was '98, the playoffs, and yeah,
Oh, okay.
But they beat Boston, but they didn't beat the Yankees. They got had a good chance, but that was the historic
That was well.
Yankee
That was
team.
that New York team in '98 might have been the greatest baseball team of all time. That of the '27 Yankees, they won 114 games, and the Indians, keep saying Guardians. The Indians were up 2 games to 1 in that series, and Chuck Knobloch made some really boneheaded
On a bunt, yeah, with
mistake.
Travis
Yeah,
Fryman.
he was arguing with the umpire, another run score, and they were up 2 games to 1 in that series. But then they lost the last 3 games. The Yankees were
I, th
swept the Padres in the World Series
I
that
think the
year.
Post or the Daily News, the headline the next day was Blockhead for
Blockhead,
Knobloch.
yeah, BL. I was in New York when that happened. I was covering that.
So, in your travels, I love talking about this as we start to wrap up the podcast here. What were some of your favorite venues? Any, whether it's baseball or basketball, football, hockey, favorite venues to go check out, and some of the worst stadiums or arenas that you were in.
Well, the best stadium I've ever been in, and it wasn't really as well. I did cover a game there. Was PNC Park in Pittsburgh.
Agreed.
It was at night. The fans were coming over the Roberto Clemente Bridge. It was absolutely beautiful. That organization does not deserve that stadium, by the in my opinion. And then I covered a lot of games, baseball games. Football is different because the stadiums are sort of similar in certain ways, and there are really no horrible stadiums, and I don't think they're really any really that great. Although I guess Dallas maybe. But anyway, Tampa, the indoor stadiums in Tampa and was a joke. And I didn't like the Metrodome very much either. The indoor, I didn't like covering baseball indoors as much. But I really my favorite place to go when I was covering a lot of Indians was Fenway Park.
Okay.
I just had so much. Fenway Park has so much personality to it, with the green monster and the way the stands jut out towards center field and the pesky pole and the Sitco sign. I love Fenway. I wasn't able to cover any games at Wrigley Field. A lot of people don't even like going there. It's just kind of historic.
Yeah, I haven't been to Wrigley since they redid it and they put the new scoreboards and they have ads. I kind of like the old school. Again, this is old school Tony talking where I like the hand operated scoreboard they used to have. Um, and then we paid $40 to park in someone's backyard because there's no parking if you're in
Oh,
Wrigleyville.
that's
But yeah, my favorite stadiums that I've been to, whether I've covered them, I've covered games at PNC and also been there as a spectator. That's been my number one. Again, like you said, if they could put that somewhere else, so they put it on in Nashville where the Titans play, just uproot the stadium, move the Pirates to Nashville, and just keep the stadium right next to the river there, near Broadway.
that'd take a really big flathead truck.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That
Yeah,
truck.
you might need a couple of trucks. That might need to take up a whole freeway, or do it in pieces and parts.
There you go.
But yeah, PNC. I really enjoyed Petco out in San Diego. I thought Petco was great. I did actually enjoy Dodger Stadium for its simplicity. That although you can only, if you buy the cheap seats, you can only go down a certain amount of levels. They won't let you hobnob. They don't let the hoi polloi end up walking around there with all the celebrities down in the lower levels. But I ended up being there actually. When we're recording this, it was 9 years ago today because it was the final day. The Vin Scully called a game at Dodger Stadium.
Oh,
And I'm like, I have to go there. I have to make it because I knew at the time he was not doing any road games. So ended up making it out to Dodger Stadium. They won on a walk-off. They not only they went on a walk-off, they won the division on a walk-off home run.
wow.
And Vin goes on the microphone and he's singing "Wind Beneath My Wings" to the crowd. I'm like, you can't beat this. You can't
No,
top
no,
this here at
no.
Dodger Stadium. So I
I
enjoyed
went
that.
to Oracle in San Francisco. The problem was I went to a day game.
Ugh.
It's just not the same there without going, if it's a day game rather than night game. And so it wasn't as special to me as it would have been. But
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of Oracle Arena, where the Warriors used to play over in Oakland. And yeah, I think the only people who are still working at that old stadium are the cats, the feral cats they employed to try to pick up the mice.
oh,
But yeah, I never got a chance to go to Oakland, but I did. The Sky Dome, I was
that
not
was a
impressed
bad.
with.
Oakland's bad too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I was not impressed with the Sky Dome when I went there. Apparently, they've done some pretty good renovations with it, but it's nice that it's downtown. It's next to the CN Tower. And also, the shirt I'm wearing right now, when I do this, they're Ryan Zimmerman. He was a rookie at the time, but I bought this when I was at RFK Stadium. And boy, you want to talk about those concrete donut
Wow.
stadiums that when the Nationals moved over from Montreal in '05, I went there in their final season in '07 before they moved into where they're at right now. Yeah, that place was just, it reminded me of going to the old Gray Lady on the lake, the Mistake by the Lake that we used to have. The chipped seats, the horrible sight lines. I understood the multi-purpose stadiums for the time, but yeah, we were way up there. It was not necessary. Not a very good place to go see a game.
My dad took me to Fenway Park when I was 10 years old. Whoops. Oh, I gotta turn this up. Hold on. I'm sorry about
No,
that.
you're good.
Ah.
No, we're about to wrap up here anyways.
Well, that's okay. I'm just gonna turn it. I'm turning off my phone altogether. And my dad took me to Fenway Park when I was 10 years old. Coincidentally, it was 1967, the impossible dream season for the Red Sox. And I was delirious because I was like, I told my dad, this is a real ballpark. This isn't some lifeless bowl like we had on Lake Erie, Cleveland Stadium that really didn't have any nuances or
Yeah.
personality. And so I really fell in love with Fenway Park even when I was just a little kid. So I like that ballpark feel, and I'm glad that that era ended where all those
The multi-purpose, the
Three
concrete
Rivers and
donuts.
yeah, Three Rivers Stadium and Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati and Cleveland Stadium in Cleveland and those kind of like in Kansas City, the big when the new stadiums came in the 90s, Camden Yards and whatever. I like that because it had a little bit more of a baseball feel to it.
Character, yeah.
Yeah.
I understood them. As time has gone on, though, I've appreciated what the purpose was in the time because you're talking about from the 60s into the 70s and it's economical that you're like, okay, well, we don't need a palace, but we can also have the football team play here. And we can also have a Billy Graham crusade, or if the Pope wants to come to town, this would be a perfect venue for it. So I get the economics of it. It's just as far as character. There wasn't any character. The only one of those I did go to was Riverfront. I got a chance to walk on the field, on the AstroTurf where the Big Red Machine played. Although by then I think Aaron Boone was playing third base. So But yeah, no, those days have gone by the wayside. It's kind of good. It's nice to go to some of these ballparks, but I'm glad that we're in this new era, and now the ballparks are basically almost the baseball is secondary. It's as long as we have a good bar and we have a good where you can pour your own beer and you could have hot dogs with Fruit Loops on it. See what I did there? I went back in time. I went
There you
to
go. Well,
call
I'll
back
tell
to
you
our
what.
previous episode.
You do not want to see me at a Guardians game. Even I live in Connecticut now, but you do not want to see me. They have lost, and I think I've kept count. They have lost 20 out of the last 24 games I have attended.
Really?
Home or road. I went to two in Fenway Park just recently, and they lost both of them. And in 2016, when they won the pennant, I went to 4 games that year. They lost them all. It's insane. It's the Marty Gitlin jinx, and I'm almost, I almost don't want to go to the games because I know that I saw him play the White Sox last year when the White Sox lost 121 games, 120, 121, and the Guardians lost that game too.
Of course. It's the hex.
It's the Marty Gitlin jinx, and right, and so if you see me at a ball game, a Guardians game, just go on to bet 365 or whatever the heck that thing is and bet against the Guardians because they're gonna lose if I'm
Perfect.
there.
Well, yeah. Well, that's yeah. Well, stay away from the playoffs. We'll
Well, I'll
see.
watch them on TV. They're doing fine with me watching them on TV.
Well, Marty, hey, I really do appreciate these last two podcasts that we have now done. And I want everybody to go to etsy.com/shop/Gitlin books, Gitlin books,
Right.
and
I
go
wrote
check
I
them
wrote a
out.
lot of
Whether
books on the histories of Major League Baseball team. They're called the Ultimate Cleveland Indians Time Machine book, and I wrote one on the histories of the Red Sox and Yankees and Cubs and Cardinals and Tigers as well. And so you'll see those there. And they're the only books that cover the entire histories of Major League Baseball franchises. So if you're fans of any of those teams, check it out, etsy.com/shop/Gitlin books. And
anything
I had
new
so
in
much
the
fun with you. What's
anything
that?
new on the horizon right now?
Yeah, I have a book coming out in September or in November called Defeated. It's a history of all the losing presidential candidates throughout history and why they lost and the issues of the day and why why those candidates lost and from Thomas Jefferson all the way to Kamala Harris.
Wow. Okay. Well,
Coming out in November.
goodness. Well, then I'm gonna have to get you on sometime again in an election season. We could talk about that,
Yeah,
and we could talk about our favorite losers.
there you go. The 1970s Cleveland Indians. There you go.
And by the way, I'll talk to you
And
off the
80s.
air, but I do have some obsessions. I'd love to see if I can collaborate with you because I have a couple of things that I've had in the back of my mind. I would love to just put pen to paper with them and try to get something going there. So
Please
yeah,
contact me.
we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll talk off the air. But Marty Gitlin, I appreciate you doing these podcasts. And if you only listen to this one or the previous one, whatever, I'm glad. I'm glad if anyone just checks it out for a couple of minutes. But if you stayed the whole time, uh, good gold stars. And if not, nerds to you. Thanks everybody for checking out the Check Your Brain podcast. We'll be back with you with another free episode coming up for you next week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Patreon. Subscribe on Patreon at patreon.com/Tony Mazur. I am Tony Mazur. And yeah, again, I will see you next week. Bye now.